My mother's voicemail picked up 17 times. I know the exact number because I counted them from a hospital bed in St. Luke's Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, with an 4 in my left arm, and a nurse named Patricia asking me quietly if there was anyone else she could call. There wasn't. My name is Jordan Ellis. I am 28 years old. This is the story of how my parents let their phone ring 17 times while I was in emergency surgery, and how the man who paid my $11,400 hospital bill, a complete stranger, walked into my family's living room 6 weeks later and said the thing that ended every excuse they had ever made. They didn't know he was coming. I did. I grew up in Westerville, Ohio, in a house where love was distributed like a reward system. My parents, Frank and Carol Ellis, had 3 children. My older brother Ryan was the oldest and the golden one, varsity everything, clean record, the son my father introduced first at every family gathering. My younger sister Megan was the baby, which meant she was protected from consequences as a matter of policy. I was the middle. In our house, that meant I was the one who was expected to manage myself. My parents weren't cruel. They were selectively present. Ryan's college was fully funded. Megan's car was bought new. When I needed $3,000 for a semester gap payment at Ohio State, my father slid me a piece of paper with a credit union's phone number and said, "You're the capable one. Figure it out." I figured it out. I always did. I worked 2 jobs through college. I graduated. I moved to Columbus and built something real on my own. I told myself the distance was healthy. What I didn't understand yet was that being capable had become their permission to disappear. The first sign came when I had a minor car accident in 2022. Nothing serious, fender, no injuries. I called my mom because I was shaken and needed a voice. It went to voicemail. She texted me 4 hours later, "Oh no. Hope you're okay." With a period after it that felt like a door closing. I said I was fine. I was not fine. But I said it. The second moment was Thanksgiving that same year. My father made a toast that mentioned Ryan's promotion, Megan's new apartment, and ended with, "And Jordan's out there doing Jordan things." 14 people laughed. I smiled because it was easier than explaining what Jordan things actually meant: 2 jobs, a lease I could barely cover, a life I had built entirely without them. I drove home alone that night and sat in my parking lot longer than I needed to. The third moment was in January of 2023. I called to tell my parents I had been promoted to senior coordinator at my firm, a real thing, a hard-won thing, and my mother listened and then said, "That's great, honey. Hey, have you talked to Ryan lately? He's thinking about buying a house, and I thought you two could connect." I said I hadn't. She said, "Okay, I'll have him call you." She never did. Then came the night that crossed every line there was. February 14, 2023. I collapsed at my apartment from a ruptured appendix. My neighbor heard me and called 911. I was in surgery within 40 minutes. When I came out, I asked Patricia, the night nurse, to call my parents. She tried my mother's cell twice. My father's cell once. No answer. I tried myself, from the hospital phone, from my cell when I could hold it. 17 calls over 4 hours. 17 voicemails. My mother texted me at 11 the next morning. "Missed some calls, everything okay?" I stared at that text for a long time. I didn't respond. Not that day. I lay in that hospital bed with the 4 pulling at the inside of my arm, and the machine beeping at steady intervals, and I thought about 14 people laughing at Jordan things. I thought about the credit union phone number. I thought about 17 calls going nowhere, while I was in a surgical room not knowing if I was going to be okay. I didn't cry. I was too exhausted and too clear. I made one decision. I was going to let this be visible. All of it. The bill came 3 weeks later. $11,400, my insurance covered $6,200. The remaining $5,200 was mine. I was still recovering, still out of work, and the number sat on my kitchen table like a quiet accusation. Then a card arrived. Handwritten. From a man named Gerald Booth, my neighbor on the left, 71 years old, retired schoolteacher, the man whose car I had jump-started twice without thinking much about it. The card said he had spoken to the billing department at St. Luke's and asked them to apply a payment toward my balance. He had paid the remaining $5,200 in full. I called him. He answered on the second ring. I asked him why. He said, because nobody else did. 6 words. They hit harder than anything my parents had said to me in years. I asked Gerald if he would be willing to come with me to my parents' house. I told him what I was doing and why. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me when." I called my mother and told her I was coming for Sunday dinner. She sounded relieved, the comfortable kind of relieved that people feel when they've gotten away with something and assume it's been forgotten. I arrived with Gerald. My father opened the door and looked at Gerald and looked at me. Ryan was there. Megan was there. 4 adults and my parents at the dinner table, which meant 9 people in total, heard what happened next. I sat down. Gerald sat next to me. My mother asked pleasantly who he was. Gerald said, "I'm the man who answered the phone in February." The table went quiet. I took out my phone and pulled up the call log. 17 calls. Time-stamped. I put it flat on the table where everyone could see it. Then I placed the hospital bill next to it, $11,400, itemized, with Gerald's payment marked in the billing notes. My father said, "Jordan, we didn't hear the phone." 17 calls, Dad. I said it quietly. 4 hours. My mother started to explain something about a dinner they'd been at, the volume being low. I let her finish. Then I said, "Gerald heard me through a wall. He was asleep. He called 911. He paid $5,200 for a neighbor he'd known for 2 years. Gerald didn't say anything dramatic. He just sat there. His presence was the whole point." My mother's hands, which had been moving while she spoke, went still on the table. Ryan looked at his plate. Megan looked at me in a way she never had before, not like a sister, but like someone trying to recalculate something. I said one thing before I stood up. "I'm not angry. I just needed you to see it." I thanked Gerald. We left. My mother called 3 times that week. The first message was defensive, something about how I had ambushed them. The second was softer. The third was an apology, real and unscripted, that arrived on a Thursday morning and lasted for minutes. She said she hadn't understood how far away they had let me get. She said she was sorry. She used the word sorry 4 times. I called her back. We talked for an hour. It didn't fix 28 years. But it was the first honest hour we'd had. My father texted 2 weeks later. 6 words, "We should have picked up. Sorry." I read it twice. I saved it. I did not respond immediately, and when I did, I kept it short. Ryan never addressed it directly. He sent me a gift card for a grocery store with a note that said, "Heard you had a rough winter." I used the gift card. I let the note be what it was. Gerald came over for dinner at my apartment in April. I made pasta. He brought a bottle of wine he described as nothing fancy, that was probably the nicest wine I'd ever had. We talked for 3 hours about nothing in particular. I live in Columbus. Same apartment, same building, neighbor on the left with a light on most evenings. My appendix scar has faded to a thin white line I sometimes notice in the mirror. I lost the version of my parents I had spent 28 years believing was just a better version waiting to emerge. The parents who would pick up. Who would show up. Who would say, without being shown a phone log, that I mattered as much as the others. That version was never coming. What I gained is a clearer understanding of who shows up and who doesn't, and the knowledge that showing up is not about proximity or obligation or blood. It's about the person who hears something through a wall at 2 in the morning and decides that it's their problem too. Gerald Booth is 71 years old. He jump-started my car once and I jump-started his twice, and we were even on the math. Then he paid $5,200 and sat at my parents' dinner table without saying a single dramatic word, and that was the most anyone had ever done for me. My parents had my number for 28 years. He had it for 2, and he was the only one who answered.